New South Wales State PM last night had 97 cases of community transmission.
And to make matters worse,
unfortunately, 29 of those, we understand, were infectious for all of the time that they were infectious in the community.
A further 17 people were also in the community for part of their infectious period, 5 under investigation, meaning that more than half of today's cases were not in isolation.
This is the number that is concerning. That number of people being infectious in the community keeps going up.
The Sydney outbreak now topping at more than 1,000 cases.
We still have a number of cases under investigation, and we are seeing the emergence of unlinked cases, which is a matter for concern.
And despite mounting pressure,
how do you stop the mobility?
Why aren't we changing tack?
The Premier won't tighten restrictions for now.
We will take whatever decision is required to have this lockdown go for as short a period of time as possible.
The number of cases is not decreasing. That means Sydney is looking at the lockdown continuing indefinitely. So it is time to take this seriously. So what the AMA is calling for is a lockdown more Victorian style.
A stark contrast to over the border.
We're all working as hard as we possibly can to make this as short a lockdown as possible, 5 days. That's certainly better than 5 weeks or 5 months.
On the first day of its hard lockdown, Victoria recorded 8 additional cases, all linked, bringing this outbreak to 26.
It very much confirms the decision, as difficult as it was, that we took yesterday to lock the state down.
So, in this tale of 2 approaches, which will emerge as the true gold standard for future Aussie outbreaks?
Epidemiologist Professor Catherine Bennett joins us now. All right, Professor, this pandemic is ever-changing, but who would you hand out the gold standard star to right now?
Well, PVO, I'd be giving it to the coronavirus. And I'm not just saying that to avoid the hard question, but at the end of the day, this is what's happening. The virus is changing, which actually means transmission and our response are changing as well, and what we need to do. So, we're all kind of learning off each other. It's a tag game here. And, the Delta we had in Victoria 5 weeks ago, very different to what New South Wales is dealing with and found out the hard way. So this time, Victoria's in a better position to watch New South Wales and know what they need to do and how early they need to do that. So I do think this is the virus.
Fair enough. So if you don't want to hand out a gold star, it's not appropriate to talk about one side or the other having the gold standard. Would that be fair, like the Prime Minister did?
Look, I do think the response at the end of the day, the Health Department response, has been as strong in both states in terms of contact tracing, and both have proven you can't get in front of the virus without lockdown. When it comes to lockdown, the timing of the lockdown, I think, did follow the evidence in both states. They were both watching the data. The lockdown itself is different in the way it's been rolled out. In Victoria, there's a real advantage in rolling out the same lockdown each time because people know the rules, it's familiar. New South Wales was in a different position. They hadn't moved to lockdown in the same way before. They designed something they thought fitted the transmission, and they're now looking at the need to keep evolving that as they understand where that's not working and if it's not working. So they're doing it differently, but we've got a different history to draw on as well, and that people understanding the rules is actually really important if you're trying to put out lockdowns and get them working very quickly.
Now, you can say that they're getting that advice and looking at the data, and I can appreciate that. But when we're looking at Victoria and New South Wales, one is completely closed, the other is essentially open for business. And both leaders are saying that they're doing this following the health advice. How can that advice be so different, and who's actually handing out this advice?
It's an interesting question, Rove, and I think one we're all kind of asking. You need to put the restrictions in place that address the areas where you have transmission concerns. So New South Wales is arguing they're looking at where transmission is occurring, they're focusing on that home and workplace transmission, but the retail, which is where most of the criticism has been, where that's been soft, other things were soft for a while and tightened, but retail is not an area they're seeing featuring strongly in their exposure sites, and that's right. We haven't seen, it's mainly been grocery stores, banks, petrol stations. But at the same time, there's something bigger going on here about messaging. And I think when you're doing it differently in different states, people get confused if they think it is more relaxed. If you can still go to the store if you need to, maybe you can go and have a coffee at your friend's house down the street. So I think it's maybe not showing up that it's not working in those exposure sites, but I do think there's now concern that it's just the messaging behind having softer rules around retail in particular that might be undermining some of the effort.
From expert opinions to in-depth analysis and reporting, the Project YouTube brings you the biggest stories from Australia and around the globe. Hit the subscribe button now for news delivered straight to your feed.